Well, new tough measures against Iran are dominating a meeting of European foreign ministers, with more sanctions expected to be imposed. The British foreign minister has accused Iran's government of supporting the repression in Syria and said there's a link between what's happening in both countries. Let's get some more details on this now and talk with the international consultant and author Adrian Salbucci, live for us from Buenos Aires. Thank you for coming on the programme today. The UK and Norway have already closed their missions in Tehran. Many other European nations set to follow suit. Do you think there's possibly any link between their mass withdrawal and Israel's earlier warnings of carrying out a bombing attack in December on Iran?
Well, there definitely is a pattern where everything seems to center on Iran, basically, but it is a pattern we are seeing throughout the whole Middle East, and we've seen it also in North Africa. This is a war by the West against most of the Islamic countries. Now, no doubt, Israel has been threatening for a unilateral military intervention into Iran for many years now, and the UK seems to be spearheading this whole process by now threatening military action themselves. They've been doing this since early November when they said they were drafting out plans. And the US seems to be taking just a step further back because they know that when things get very hot, and they probably will, unfortunately, in Iran and in Syria, the buck always stops with the US military. So yes, this definitely is part of a whole process of generalized war by the West against the Muslim states,
so
notably
as you
Iran.
say, this is ultimately part of a Western war against Arab states. But if I can just move on here, severing embassy ties with Iran wouldn't allow these states to be inside the country where they can, as some might say, keep an eye on it. What are the possible consequences that this diplomatic isolation could have for Iran? Or is it just simply a smokescreen and the West all along is playing these cards of isolation and sanctions and alleged nuclear weapons program when all in all, as you were saying, they're just looking for a war?
Well, it's a very complex war. That's what they are waging. The greater complexity in war means fighting it on the diplomatic stage, on the financial stage, as they have been doing with economic sanctions against Iran and its central bank. And very much so, we can see how they are now preparing the whole scene so as to justify a day that will live in infamy, sort of like Pearl Harbor. They took our embassy, knowing that in the public eye or in the public mind, this brings memories of the 1979 taking of the U.S. embassy in Tehran. Now, embassies should never be taken, no doubt about that. It is not the proper way to go. But we don't really quite know what it is that is happening in Iran with the embassy, whether there are local agitators. We've seen agitation throughout the country. And, for example, Ali Larihani, who's the parliamentary speaker for Iran, in a way said that this is also the result of several decades of behavior on the part of the UK trying to dominate Iran. And he is very right, because we must remember that Britain invaded Iran in World War I, it invaded Iran in World War II, it tried to invade Iran in 1951 but was stopped by the United States, and then the Eisenhower administration and the British administration in 1953 violently orchestrated a coup d'etat, a military takeover that removed
but of course, as you say that, we also had the Iranian embassy siege in London roughly 3 decades ago. But I mean, as you're suggesting, there is a much broader picture here when it comes to how the West is dealing with Iran. But when we focus on the issue of sanctions, sanctions are a tried and tested tactic of the West. But are they the most effective approach to solving the issue surrounding Tehran's nuclear ambitions?
I very much doubt it, because sanctions will only, since Iran does have its back protected, in part by China, also in part by Russia, which seems to be getting fed up with these permanent advances on the part of NATO, I don't think sanctions will do the trick. That's why the fear, the real peril, is that they might end up resorting to unilateral military invasion. But we must remember one thing. The United States, Americans, play poker, which is a game of deceit and lies. The Iranians invented chess, which is a game of strategy and intelligence.
All right. Now, if we, you mentioned Russia just a few minutes ago. Russia saying it wants the standoff to be solved using diplomacy. As we say, and certainly as what you're suggesting, the West ultimately has no intention of diplomacy here. What stakes does Russia hold in this ongoing the West versus Iran dispute?
No doubt Russia at some point has to draw the line. in a way, thank God for the rest of the world that there is a balancing factor against unilateral Western interventionism, especially on the part of the United States, Britain, and Israel. And as no doubt, China and Russia will have a very important card to play. And although they have been very cautious and very serious about the way they have been approaching this, the way they approach Libya, the way they are approaching Syria, at some point, Russia will draw the line. And I think that will either see the Western powers draw back and stand down, or we might have a much more generalized war in the region, which could escalate to global proportions. So we are seeing the West playing with fire.
International consultant and author Adrian Salbuccia, live for us from Buenos Aires. Many thanks. Well, still to come for you this hour here on RT.